Welcome to Brevard News, your home for real news in Brevard County. My name is Kevin Jeffrey, your moderator, and I am joined by the Commish, District 1 County Commissioner Katie Delaney. Katie, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And that brings us to our quote of the week, and our quote of the week is from Carl Sagan. Now, I disagree with Carl Sagan on a lot of things, but I think he's right about this one, and it's about being bamboozled. Now, notice what he says. One of the saddest lessons of history is this. If we've been bamboozled long enough, we tend to reject evidence of the bamboozle. We're no longer interested in finding out the truth. The bamboozle has captured us. It is simply too painful to acknowledge, even to ourselves, that we've been taken. Once you give a charlatan power over you, you almost never get it back. And that could be said about your politicians today. There's a quote that goes around, and I think you may have heard it. You know that it's easier to fool people than to convince them that they've been fooled? And that's what Sagan is talking about in this quote. Okay, so that brings us to the state legislature, and there are some things that you want to actually hear about that they are considering in Tallahassee. And one of the first things is Ryan Chamberlain, who is from Bellevue, Florida, introduced the idea of getting rid of property taxes. And so this is not just something that Governor DeSantis brought up. I mean, there's a bill in the House and also in the Senate concerning this. Now, notice what Chamberlain says, and he had a press conference several days ago about this, and he said this. He says, I filed this bill last year for two reasons. The first is because under the current system of property taxation, no one ever owns their property. Chamberlain said, they just lease it from the government, and that's true. So when you buy your home, you would think that you own your home, but that's not the case. Think about it. If you can't pay the property taxes on your family home, your family farm, or your small business warehouse, your property will be seized by the state and given to someone else. And that's a fact. Now notice he goes on to say, the second reason that he brought this bill forward is that our property tax system is unfair. Property taxes are collected on unrealized gains. Now, Joe Biden was criticized about this when the federal government was wanting to actually tax on unrealized gain. Well, you could be in your house and actually never want to move, but you're going to be taxed because the market value of your property has gone up, even though you don't realize those gains. These taxes, he said, aren't collected on the actual value of a property when it is sold, but on what some local government bureaucrat thinks it might be worth. If you sold it right now, what it would be worth if you sold it right now, let me say. It's time that we stop this nonsense, and that's what Chamberlain says. Now, I'm going to say I'm partial here because I've always believed that this is one of the worst taxes. Katie, it looks like this is actually getting some headway. There's another bill in the Senate being introduced. What do you think about this? We've talked about it before. It looks like it's actually moving forward. What are your thoughts as a county commissioner?
Well, as a citizen, I love it.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't agree more that we don't ever truly own our property because of property taxes. As a county commissioner, like I said last time, we just have to have a plan. The legislature, my only ask is that you guys put together a plan because we can't just turn the lights off one day and then turn them back on.
Now, in the Senate, they did authorize a plan. One of the senators authorized a plan, and they're actually authorized a study into what would replace the property taxes. And I think that report is supposed to be available on October 2025. So they're looking at all of the possibilities of what could replace the property taxes. And so, I mean, this is just unbelievable that this is being considered. I mean, you go to places, and as we've seen in Oregon and California, you can't really afford it. I mean, the property taxes are higher than mortgage payments in many instances. And from a citizen's point of view, that's the problem. But you understand, as a county commissioner now, this is a totally different ballgame. How do you pay for this?
Right, exactly. Right. And I hope that the legislature doesn't stop at the property taxes. I hope that they, for many years, a lot of them have talked about the insurance crisis that's going on in our state. And I hope that they continue to fix that issue as well. And I think part of that is the way that we're developing in Florida. We have really messed with our with the drainage and the flow of water by filling in a lot of our wetlands. And thankfully, Governor DeSantis is starting to roll back some of those changes that they made and restore the Everglades. And that's extremely necessary because if we don't fix the damage that we've done, we're going to have some real problems as far as our homes getting destroyed. And
And the insurance rates that follow as a result of that, right? So that's become a real problem. As quiet as kept, a lot of people are leaving the state of Florida now because they can't afford the insurance rates.
Right.
I think that our insurance rates have doubled in the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, we're getting slaughtered.
And with that being said, a lot of people are leaving, but a lot of people are coming because Florida is still a pretty a relatively cheap place to live if you're used to Oregon or California,
or New York, correct.
These different places. So, but for the people that have lived in Florida forever, I mean, this is a really bad hit, and that's why they're looking at moving elsewhere because it's getting to be so much more expensive.
Particularly if you're on a fixed income, if you're older. And there's some other issues that are coming up before the state legislature, and a couple of them jumped out, and they affect people in Brevard County as well as other counties. So S 1814 says that authorizing a law enforcement officer or a school employee to conduct a custodial interrogation of a minor only under specific circumstances. Excuse me. So this is actually limiting the authority of law enforcement officers to actually interrogate a kid without his parents available.
Right. Which I am all for this. I've always been a huge proponent of parental rights. And honestly, it's one of the reasons why I homeschool my children, because I was not okay with somebody feeling like they had more authority over my children than I do. And so I just never felt, I never felt particularly safe in that. And so I'm glad that the legislature is stepping in and solidifying that authority that parents have over their children.
And that's a big thing. I mean, and so here it is. This hasn't passed yet, but it's one of the bills that are coming up for consideration. So also on the docket is 1714, and it's requiring each county and eligible municipality to include in its local housing assistance plan a certain strategy providing that a lot of rental assistance for eligible mobile homeowners is approved home ownership activity for certain purposes. So you saw that, right? What is it talking about here?
So it looks like it's trying to expand some of the programs that we have in the counties and the eligible cities to expand to mobile homes, which I think that's great because in Brevard County we have quite a bit of residents who live in mobile homes, and a lot of times they don't qualify for some of these programs because of their living situation. I think that's great that we should expand those programs.
In fact, in the state of Florida is probably one of the largest states or the largest areas for manufactured mobile homes, right? In the country. All right, and so that's the state legislature. The big one, of course, is the property tax bill, and so we're going to stay on top of this and see where this goes. Hopefully they will come up with an alternative for everyone involved and everyone will be happy with this, but certainly taxation can be cut somewhere, and I actually believe that cutting the taxes will also cut corruption. We'll see. So we have two special elections coming up on April 1st, which I think is an odd day to have an election, but it is the day that is set aside for this election. Is a special election in District 32, right? And that's the seat to replace Debbie Mayfield. And then also in District 19, and the Senate seat that is going to replace Senator Randy Fine, who won and who's now running for Congress. And so we're getting some activity here. We got an endorsement for Leitner in a group called We the People of Brevard, who is trying to organize the citizens of Brevard to get conservative candidates elected in Brevard County. And so he received that yesterday from that group. And also concerning Leitner, there's going to be a forum coming up by the Brevard County Republican Assembly, and it's going to be on the 20th of March, and this is going to be live cast. And so it's going to be between Thomas and Leitner and also Marcy Atkins. And so you have a lot going on here. This is kind of an odd time to have an election. And just tell me about how did these normally go? This is a special election. I think the early voting starts in a couple of weeks. How do these normally go? So does the incumbent have an advantage in an early election? Is it name recognition? What happens in a special election?
Usually, a special election, it's such short notice that somebody with name recognition, a lot of times they will have a leg up on their competition, just because there's not enough time really to campaign and knock all the doors you need to knock and all of those things. But the one good thing about this, about the Senate race in particular, is that there are so many candidates, 4 candidates in this race.
So in the other race with District 32, it's only three people that are running. Okay.
Yep.
So this 4, how does that change the dynamics of what's happening in this race?
So it just splits the vote up more. And there's 2 men and 2 women. So it's the political science behind this. Nobody really has an advantage, which is kind of cool. It's going to be interesting how this race shakes out. And I really believe it's going to come down to who knocks the most doors.
So do you think that because Debbie Mayfield has an advantage because she's been around a long time, that's going to override everything else, or no?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. It's in these special elections, it really is any man's race or any woman's race, because this, like I said, there's so many people in the race. There's 2 men and 2 women, so it just, nothing that typically would give you a leg up is really there in this race. So it's going to be interesting.
So you have District 32, in which Bob White and Mr. Cronin
Correct.
are
Dr.
running against
Cronin
each other.
And Brian Hodgers.
And Brian Hodgers. And then in District 4, you have Leitner, you have Thomas, you have Atkins, and Mayfield.
19. District 19.
Excuse me, 19. What did I say? Where did I get District 4 from? Okay, District 19, you have those 4. And so we'll see what's going to happen in those elections. Very important elections as to see who's going to represent, particularly in District 19, from 405 all the way down to Miko. It's a really huge district, and it's the state Senate seat, I think I'll get out here, that Randy Fine left behind in order to run for Congress. And so we'll see what happens in that election. And so this brings us to the news in Palm Bay. And so just a bizarre statement made by Mayor Medina, who is the mayor of Palm Bay. And it is covered well by Thomas Guam, who has the Palm Bayer newspaper. And his editorial, he really hits this really well. But notice he quotes Medina and the statement Medina said at a Palm Bay City Council meeting. And notice what he says. Medina did. The public comment portion of our agenda, excuse me, is an important time for our city council to hear the community. Thank you for submitting your speaker card. When we have multiple speakers or multiple speaker cards on the same topic, we would like to hear first from a community leader who can represent the shared perspectives of like-minded citizens. We can then ask for a show of hands of those in attendance who support the leader's comments. What is this? This is unbelievable. Notice what he goes on. He says, in addition, many of the topics brought forward during the public comments are best handled by the city manager and his staff. To keep our meeting efficiently focused on city business, I respectfully ask that my fellow city council members refrain from dialogue on matters which are best handled administratively. Instead, city staff members are here and available to speak outside with the members of the public to discuss these administrative matters. An issue can't be addressed immediately. The city manager's office will contact speaker within 3 business days. Are they just throwing the Constitution out and just kind of making things up as they go along? What is this? What is going on here?
I am literally speechless when it comes to. I'm so surprised, and I'm horrified that Mayor Medina would propose these changes. I mean, contrary to popular belief, the city business is the people's business.
Well, he doesn't seem to think so.
The people's voice and the people's concerns is the city business. So I don't understand how when politicians say things like this, oh, we have to make our meetings run efficiently, we have to No, your purpose there is to listen to the citizens and see what their concerns are and what their desires are. And then you are there to represent them.
And he seems to think that the emphasis on the effectiveness of the managing of the council meeting itself is more important than the dialogue
Right.
with the people. And
Right.
it's just an amazing thing. And so you're beginning to see this over and over and over again in city governments and county governments where the people are not seen as important. And we'll see later on that that's changing in Brevard County. Katie has had a hand in that. But I mean, this is speech to, it's the people's government. And I don't think, Mr. Medina, you might want to remember, it's the people's government. It's not the elected bureaucrats. It's the people's government, and it's the responsibility of the elected politicians to actually be there for the people, right? To
Right.
listen to their concerns. I mean, what's
Right.
wrong with 3 minutes listening to the citizens?
Right.
And who decides who is the leader of the community?
Correct.
Who decides that?
Right.
I mean, that's a very subjective thing.
And I mean, there could be major legal ramifications to this. When I was part of I was a named plaintiff in a First Amendment lawsuit against our prior school board back in 2021. And it was for things like this, are exactly the reason why we sued
And won.
and won in the 11th Circuit Court. And now boards across the country are going to have to change their public comment policy because of that ruling. And because of that ruling, it would be very easy for a citizen, if they go through with these changes, to sue this government over this. This is outrageous.
It seems to be eliminating the opportunity for citizens, each individual citizen, to speak and to voice their opinion on an issue. And again, who are considered the leaders of the community.
Right.
I mean, it seems very nebulous. And so
It seems clear that this is a violation of the residents' constitutional rights.
I oftentimes think that I'm speechless with what I see politicians say, but Mr. Medina, you've made me, this takes the cake. I just cannot believe that you made that statement and thought that it was actually good to do. Now that brings us to our Brevard News post, and we had a survey online, and the question for the week was, should city or county leaders change residential zoning to accommodate for developers? Now, we didn't have a whole lot of people who chimed in, but of the people that chimed in, 84% said no. Is that a surprise?
Definitely not.
1% said yes, 0% said absolutely yes, 12% said it depends on the situation, and 3% said absolutely no. And so that kind of is in line with what we see with people, that a lot of the people are totally against this, right?
Absolutely. Like we've said before, the comprehensive plan is put in place for a reason, and it involves so much citizen input and so much planning that when developers come in and try to change that, it's just not appropriate, because the people and the staff have worked really hard to decide how they want their cities to look and their county to look. And so any changes that get made to that really need to be done very carefully.
And again, it's not against, and there's the issue that comes up as to whether this is against property rights. So I buy property in a neighborhood, but that doesn't
Right.
give me carte blanche to go in and change the complexity of that neighborhood. If I
Correct.
have to get variances and get the zoning rechanged, right?
Right.
So I should understand that when I buy into that neighborhood, that there is
Absolutely.
zoning in that neighborhood, and I should be okay with that, right?
Right.
If I'm going to purchase property in that neighborhood.
There's actually a disclaimer when you buy property that says that buyers need to do their due diligence when purchasing. And if that property is not zoned the right way, that's your fault as the purchaser. You need to buy a piece of property that is,
Zoned for that reason.
Exactly, that you can build whatever project you want on it. If it's a apartment complex, it needs to be multifamily. If it's a single family home, it needs to be, residential. Or if it's a business, it's got to be commercial. It's pretty clear.
And this is where the issue is coming in, and no one is trying to stop builders from building, but developers should not believe that they can come in and bully their way into a neighborhood
Right.
and change the complexity of a neighborhood in which the residents believed when they bought into that neighborhood 20, 30, 40 years before that this
Absolutely.
was the way that the neighborhood was going to be. They have a right to be able to hold to that belief. And
Right.
so who gives the developers, and this is where it really comes in, who you vote for on your city councils are going to really matter, because
For sure.
they're going to be the ones that decide whether they're going to give variances
Right.
to these kind of zoning issues. And so it's just not right what is happening. And so our poll reflects that most people do not believe that. Now that brings us to our Commish Report, and it's from Katie Delaney, the County Commission District 1 Commissioner. And Katie, a lot to talk about this week. Great success on the Speak Up Brevard. Did that go beyond your expectations?
Absolutely. It was such an amazing moment for our community, and really, I feel like for the commissioners and the staff as well, because the energy in the room that night of the workshop was just, you had to be there to feel it. It was so amazing. All of the ideas, all of the encouragement from all the residents. It was just so positive and productive. People came with ideas and solutions. It was just a really magical night.
Great exchange between some of the commissioners. I know that Altman even actually commended one of the residents for his plan and thought that it was workable.
Right.
You had a lot of exchange there between the commissioners and the people, which is really what the way that this plan was supposed to work itself out, right?
Absolutely.
So were you just beaming there?
I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kept saying to myself, don't look too happy, don't, because
Yeah.
I didn't want to. I just knew that all we had to do was just swing the doors open and let the people in, and it would just be
And they didn't
incredible. Right.
bite. I mean, and the commissioners actually, one of them said that this was one of the more positive
Yeah.
opportunities that they've had.
Absolutely.
So it's a really good thing to be able to see the ideals that were brought forth, of the percentage of ideals brought forth. Now, tell me before we get into that, what happens with the ideals that were brought forth?
So now what happens is the staff continues their going through them all, and basically will give the commissioners their recommendations. And at that point, then the submitters, they will get a letter 7 days prior to whatever meeting this gets voted on, and that way they can show up and kind of fight one last time for their item. And at that point, the commissioners decide, do they go with staff recommendations? Do they, pull some of them and say, no, I kind of like this idea. I want to, see if we can find a yes in there somewhere. And then we vote on it.
And so this is allowing the citizens to give their ideas about different situations in the county
Right.
that they believe should happen, like mine, which I didn't get a chance to submit, and lowering the dais. And
Yeah.
I'm going to be there next year. I'm going to make sure I bring that forth. And so what is the percentage of the ideas that you think has a chance of being approved?
Honestly, I hate to even give a percentage because you just never know
A lot of great
how
ideas?
people are going to vote. There are so many great ideas. I mean, there was one for creating a Doge in Brevard County. There's one for, there were multiple.
Did that go well with the commissioners?
Oh, I love it. I loved it. I think that that's the best thing ever. We'll see, how the other commissioners felt about it. But there was a bunch of ideas about low impact development and some things that I never really thought about. Like, for instance, there's this bird called the least tern, and I had never heard of it before. And it's specific to Brevard County. It lives here and goes to the Caribbean when it migrates, and then it comes back here. But because of all of the development, their habitats are getting destroyed. And so one of the ways that people help this animal is putting gravel on flat roofs, and then they can make that their homes. And so that's a pretty cool thing. Somebody mentioned maybe giving some businesses some incentives to do that. And there were just so many great ideas and so many things that were not even on my radar, and now they are, and it's really cool.
So what's the process now? So you, the staff study says they make recommendations. the citizens have an opportunity to, who had theirs approved, to come and defend them. What is the timetable that we're looking at for this process to run its course?
My guess would be sometime between May and early June.
Okay.
But we don't have a date yet, but that's what I would guess, because they have, from the time January 31st, the staff had 120 days to get their recommendations together.
Mm-hmm.
So that's about the timeline that I think.
Great process. This is the kind of process that the founding fathers envisioned. This is the kind of government that you would want, is that this interaction with the people.
Right.
And you find out they don't bite, and many times the people have great ideas.
Absolutely.
Frank Abate retires. On our Brevard News website, there's some very interesting comments made about Frank Abate. We won't repeat some of them here, but he is now in the retirement phase. Thoughts on Frank Abate? And if you didn't know, Frank Abate is the the county manager of Brevard County.
So it's no surprise that Mr. Abate and I have not always had the best relationship. But one thing I will say is that he was extremely helpful to me when I got on this board. And even before I got elected, he was helpful in allowing me to go and meet with all the directors and get to know them and their teams and whatnot. And he didn't have to do that. And so that's something that I really appreciate about him and that he did. That being said, I'm very excited for what new leadership could do for Brevard County. I think that getting somebody from out of the area would be really helpful. Somebody fresh, somebody new, with a lot of energy, that has new ideas and new perspective on things. And I would really love to have somebody that is very focused on citizen engagement, and also somebody who understands that public safety is extremely needed and necessary, and that we need to value them.
So does it have to be someone who has actually shown that they've engaged in providing public safety or doing some of the things that you're looking for?
I think that even if they don't necessarily have like a resume as far as, I got this kind of contract for my public safety officers. I think it's more of a philosophy, how do they feel is the value of our public safety officers. And then also somebody who understands that our county is exploding, that we, with the growth, and that how we need to balance that with our infrastructure struggles and things like that. We almost need like a crisis manager, almost, because.
Well, he's going to be walking into an explosive situation.
Absolutely.
So what is the process that the county commission has in choosing a county manager?
So we haven't talked about that. We haven't decided on how we're going to do this yet. But what I would personally love to see is I would love to see an interim that is probably in-house for right now while we go and do a national search. And what I would like to see happen there is for the RFP to go out, and
RFP?
The request for proposal,
okay,
to go out and basically say, these are the type of qualities we're looking for in a county manager. And once it comes back to us and gets pared down to a reasonable number, maybe 30 or 50, we could maybe even have a citizen workshop. Or I really want citizen input when it comes to us picking our new county manager, because I really feel like we need community buy-in.
So the citizens really see a lot. I mean, they have really good instincts about
Absolutely.
people, right? And most of the time, no one wants to hear their opinion about it because of that. I mean, but they can really spot a flake when they see it. I mean,
For
so
sure.
having that citizen involvement is going to be important, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
So do you think that the workshop is possible?
I hope so. I'm going to propose it, so we'll see. how that goes.
We'll see. The other thing is, Florida Today did a question in their newspaper, and really it was interesting on the firefighter pay increase. And some of the responses are not what you would think that they would have been. I mean, it was overwhelmingly in favor of increasing the pay for the firefighters. And so notice in this one, it says it's past time for Brevard County to bring the department up to the 21st century standards for wages and benefits. These people lay it on the line 24/7 to protect taxpayer lives. Thank you for your service. Without showing them, it is a disgrace. If it weren't for all the retired snowbirds living off the residents and complaining about taxes, we would have a very advanced county instead of the inept county that exists. We used to have the top-rated public schools in the state, but the snowbirds keep voting everything down and then leave for the summer. There should be a law that if you don't live here year-round, you don't vote for the rest of the year. Now, that's interesting, but they did support the firefighters.
Right.
And they thought, and then and this was pretty consistent throughout their answers.
Absolutely.
And so there is, and you see it, a real movement behind the firefighters to get
Right.
paid. So do you think that the resolution is going to be coming up here pretty quickly? Or is the retirement of Frank Abate going to affect the movement with regard to the firefighters?
Possibly. Mr. Abate doesn't leave, his last day isn't until May 31st. So we still have a couple months. So I'm not sure where the impasse process will be. I know that if I have it my way, we're going to keep trying to get to a contract before the magistrate comes back with an opinion. But
And that's coming up here quickly, right?
I think it's about 45 days.
Mhm.
But really, I would like to see something quicker than that, because our people are struggling, and we really need to resolve this thing.
So even if you resolved it, I mean, at the depth that the employment situation is with the firefighters right now, it's going to take a little bit of time to rebuild
Absolutely.
some of the ground that's been lost,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, Brevard County's reputation in the fire industry, I mean, it's totally shot.
Mhm.
And it's because, the word has gotten out that the conditions are, the work-life balance and the salary is not where it needs to be. And so that's why I've committed to even going around with our recruiters once we get to that point, and helping convince some of these people to come to Brevard, because I can pretty much guarantee you that there's no other county commissioners that are going around and trying to recruit firefighters. So,
Well, and you have, I spoke with a firefighter from over at Orange County who actually is working in Orange County, who
Right.
actually said she would love to work in Brevard County, but because of the conditions, she actually drives over to Orange
Right.
County. So maybe some of those people will come back.
I hope so.
Yeah.
And I mean, with the contract that I'm hoping that we get to bring forward, it's going to be a good thing for people. And I'll be the first one who's knocking on doors, making phone calls, saying, "Please come back to Brevard. We need you." And so hopefully that'll work out.
And that's the Commish Report for this week. And that brings us to our kudos of the week. And actually, we have a kudos going out to the Titusville Police Department for finding the murderer of a local resident, Miss Jessie Kirk. And so kudos to you, and we give credit to where credit is due. This was a horrible situation for the city of Titusville, and give kudos to you that you were able to solve this crime and solve it lickety-split. And so kudos to TPD, as well as kudos to Dave Berman of Florida Today. Now, he did a story in the Sunday edition on the CARES Act and the money distribution and where it went. If you haven't read that, you really need to read it. Great story. Kudos to you, Dave Berman, for some really good journalism in the Florida Today. And that brings us to my 2 cents. James Monroe was 18, Aaron Burr was 20, Alexander Hamilton was 21, and James Madison was 25. Each of the aforementioned founding fathers of the Constitution were 25 and under on July 4th, 1776. Age is just a number when destiny calls. Destiny is calling for Mark Leitner. If you haven't heard our exclusive interview with him on Brevard News, you need to check it out. He is a man who is wise beyond his years. In an age dearth of principled, constitutional, uncompromised candidates, Leitner stands out. The time is well past to put Debbie Mayfield's time in Tallahassee to rest. Her tenure has done more to damage the people of Florida. The Live Local Act that she had a hand in passing is just one example. The bill SB 102 will not and has not provided affordable housing, but it has provided more government control of communities than this country has ever seen. According to Florida Politics News, the act forces local governments to approve multifamily housing developments in areas zoned for commercial, industrial, and mixed uses if the project sets aside 40% of its units at affordable rates, defining and offering rents within 30% of the local median income. The developments in turn would be required to adhere to a city or county's comprehensive plan except for density, height, and restrictions. There have been several bills that followed up the Live Local Act trying to amend the problems with the Live Local Act, but you can only sugarcoat dung so many times. This was and is a bad bill, and from a legislature that is purported to be conservative. Leitner just received an endorsement this week from We the People of Brevard County. My 2 cents joins We the People of Brevard County in endorsing Leitner. General Douglas MacArthur stated it this way: "A true leader has the confidence to stand alone, the courage to make tough decisions, and the compassion to listen to the needs of others. He does not set out to be a leader, but becomes one by the equality of his actions and the integrity of his intent." America is in desperate need for good principled leadership, and no matter the age, and Mark Leitner fits the bill, and that's my 2 cents.